To discuss this further, from Sweden, Afrah Nasser is a Yemeni journalist and co-founder of Yemeni Salon. From England, Shakdam is a Middle East political analyst and works with the Shafaqna Institute for Middle Eastern Studies. And with me in studio, Ibrahim Alqatabi. He's a Yemeni expert and political commentator. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Afrah, let me start with you. This war's been going on for almost a year right now. 2 million people displaced, millions facing starvation, thousands killed. What are conditions like inside the country right now?
Well, it's catastrophic. The humanitarian situation is extremely, it's beyond the words, even beyond the description that I can, or there are not words that I can describe the humanitarian catastrophic situation in Yemen. As I am speaking now, I can expect that anyone of my family or my mom being bombed because the internal fights and even the Saudi-led coalition airstrikes that does not differentiate between civilians and combatants. So it's hard to imagine life under such circumstances.
And what about access to water and food and things like that, and shelter for one thing?
That's absolutely difficult. People are literally struggling to stay alive. Especially Taiz city has been under blockade by the Houthis militants for nearly a year now, and people are really starving to death. And the UN has had a lot of difficulties to enter aid and to enter food and medicine. And that goes as well to different parts in Yemen. And the black market has been really popular for a lot of people who can't really afford to get food or medicine or other supplies. And those who can't, they struggle to really stay alive.
Catherine, put this conflict in some kind of perspective for us. What started this war, and how did Saudi Arabia get involved in it?
Well, it all started really with, I would say, the resignation back in 2015, it was, of President Hadi. He resigned and he said that he basically wanted to have nothing to do with what's happening in Yemen, which was I would say, a rising movement against his legitimacy and his presidency. And you have to remember that he was elected in a one-man election, and a lot of people saw in this a farce, a democratic farce, and what they wanted to do was to go back to the drawing table and have the people have a real voice, which was carried by the Houthi movement. And then he ran away to Aden, making things very difficult for everybody because he refused to engage into political talks with Houthi and other factions within Yemen. And then he decided to actually run away to Saudi Arabia. And this is when, in March of last year, the kingdom decided to unilaterally bomb Yemen. Now, if I can quickly go back to the humanitarian situation, I'd like to make something very, very clear. The UN has not tried to get anything through because the UN has agreed under Saudi order that there would be a humanitarian blockade installed in Yemen and imposed onto Yemen, meaning that nothing will get through, whether medicine, whether food or water or any other supplies will get through to Yemen. On account, the Saudi have tried to block the resistance movement in Yemen. I'm not just referring to the Houthi, I'm talking about the resistance which has been organized under the leadership of the Houthi, which represents the greater majority of Yemen. And this is not to say that everyone agrees with the Houthi, but that right now in Yemen, everyone understands that the Houthi are actually standing up and fighting for the liberation of Yemen against an imperial power, which is Saudi Arabia. And for this, millions of people have suffered, millions of people have been displaced, and about 23 out of 26 million people are starting to starve because Saudi Arabia deemed fit to exercise a humanitarian blockade on Yemen, which is not only illegal, but it is actually a war crime under the very definition of the UN. And this is something now that people are trying to fight and are trying to denounce. And there was actually a report made in Min Press back in 2015 and in Vice News arguing and proving beyond any doubt that the Saudi have exercised and exerted pressure onto the UN, promising funding onto other programs should they allow for Yemen to be blockaded absolutely and totally. And this in just, this one order and the fact that the UN actually went with it goes to show how much outside the law the UN is actually operating. It's ludicrous to believe that an entire country, an entire people have been put under blockade just because the Saudi decided that it was fit to their agenda.
Right. Are you saying that the United Nations has agreed to this blockade, or is it a situation where the United Nations is not able to get aid through, its aid convoys through?
They're sitting by. They're standing by it.
Well, they're being prevented from getting those aid convoys through.
They're standing by it, so they're not doing anything. Aid convoy have been bombed by the Saudi, so that should tell you something. MSF was bombed by the Saudi. An Oxfam warehouse was actually destroyed by the Saudi. And when they raised the issue, then very quickly they had to withdraw their complaint. That tells you the kind of lobbying that the Saudi are able to exert in the United Nations and other Western capitals for that matter. And those are not allegations, those are proof, those are something that actually happened. It's been documented by the press. There is no conspiracy theories, it's just cold, hard facts.
Right. Now, I just want to be clear that the United Nations hasn't imposed this blockade, has not agreed to it. It's being prevented by a Saudi blockade, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, Ibrahim, we now have direct talks taking place between Saudi Arabia and the Houthi rebels. What are the two sides trying to achieve?
I think for the Houthis, they kind of, at this point, understand that the legitimate government, along with their forces and the resistance in Yemen, are close to Sana'a. So basically, they're trying to save face. They try to maintain their power, sort of the Hezbollah style. For the Saudis, they just want to knock them off. Saudis will never agree that they will have some sort of a Hezbollah-style group within Yemen that will be hostile to Saudi and to the region. I just want to go back to what the other guests were talking about in terms of had he run away from Sana'a, and he ran from Sana'a to Aden and to Aden to Saudi. Let's be clear. Let's get the facts straight. I think there was a coup staged by the Houthi militia and Saleh against the legitimate government. We know, I agree that Hadi was selected, but also Hadi was elected by 6 million people, and he was elected only for 2 years. There was a transitional peace process going on in Yemen.
Was he deposed or did he resign?
He was forced to resign. Yeah. As you know, he was under house arrest. When you're under house arrest, you don't know what's happening inside the house. And the only one that controlled the Houthi, the capital by then, it was the Houthi, and they were trying to take over. And let's be clear about what the Houthi movement is. They are a sectarian group. Believe that they somehow are related to the Prophet Muhammad, and that gives them sort of the right to actually control the Yemeni lives and take over the country. I think we need to know that the Houthi is a militia, is not a legitimate government. They're not fighting like the other guest was saying about to liberate Yemen. Yemen is not a sectarian regime. There are so many different subgroups within Yemen, whether in the south, the middle, the north. We know the Houthi made it clear that they're trying to restore power that they lost in the 60s. You know, Yemen was controlled by one group for the past 1,000 years. What a lot of people don't know in the media and also in the Western media and in particular is that there is an internal struggle inside the country. There is a group in the north part of Yemen, what we call Sana'a, Sada, and Amran. This group is being controlling the country for the past 1,000 years. They want to maintain that power. You remember, there was after the uprising in Yemen, there was a peace process. Yemenis came together. There was a national dialogue, and they laid out how they want a government that will have, that would ensure everyone's rights, protect everyone's rights, and everyone will have a fair share and access. But the problem when they were drafting the Constitution, they were about to bring it down to the people to vote on it and then go to election. At that time, Houthi and Saleh and the dictator staged a coup to prevent any political process in Yemen to turn Yemen into a democracy.
But the situation right now is that the country is in conflict. Catherine, you wanted to say something?
Yes, no, I want to say that, it's completely untrue to portray the Houthi as a sectarian group. That's not true. This is the narrative that Riyadh has tried to frame. and to kind of propel onto the media because it actually fits its agenda. It's trying to create a situation where people are led to believe that there is in fact sectarian tensions in Yemen when this is not true. Yemen has never had a sectarian problem. The only reason why today we are talking about Shia and Sunni and we are talking about Zaidi and Sunni, it is because Riyadh has worked really, really hard at trying to define the Houthi as this, Iranian-led Hezbollah type militia, when this is not true. They have said that Iran was supporting Yemen in terms of, providing weapons and training. That's not true. We know today that this is not true. Yemen has plenty of weapons. They did not need Iran. Iran is very far away, by the way. It would be difficult to break the blockade that Saudi Arabia has imposed. And what you're trying to say about, President Hadi, he actually resigned not once but twice, and of his own volition. He went on TV. There was no gun put to his head. And he actually, by himself, when the Houthi entered the capital, they did so peacefully because he actually addressed an order onto all the ministry, the interior ministry and the military, saying that they should not fight the Houthi because they came in peace. So do not tell me there was a coup d'etat.
Okay, I want to get back to the humanitarian situation. I want to bring Afrah back in. Afrah, thousands of Yemeni civilians have died in these Saudi bombings. Human rights groups are now calling for an investigation into those bombings and possible war crimes. What can you tell us about the casualties and what has happened here?
But before, I want to add some point to the other guests' comments. I think as much as it's important to have the political analysis of the situation and how the political process have gone through, but it's also important to differentiate between the humanitarian situation and the political debate about the politics of Yemen. So now we are facing a situation where by many reports from Amnesty and Human Rights Watch and Oxfam, we are dealing in Yemen with a catastrophic humanitarian situation that are 80% of Yemen population are in need of humanitarian assistance, and that's like the biggest portion of human beings on earth living and needing help. While you imagine that the world is rallying to help them out, their cry outs are not heard by the world. So I think given the current or the latest development between the Saudis and the Houthis with the prisoners swamp yesterday, there was a crucially important element that not a lot of people, especially the UN, are not taken into consideration when trying to push for a solution or to find like a way out or an exit for the continuous conflict in Yemen. I think the tribal intervention factor with how they intervened and led this prisoners swamp between the Houthis and the Saudis on the borders, this is a crucial, important factor that not many Western or the international community and the UN are not taken into consideration. This group, the tribes, they have a extremely beneficial intervention that they can do in Yemen just to stop the bloodshed and even to at least to stop the humanitarian catastrophe, because the future that lies for Yemen is really tragic, if not even dealing with the atrocities that are already committed, at least just to stop the atrocities today.